And Brett, Susie's just missing the link and I'm gonna push it out to her and she'll be right in with us.
Okay, great. Yeah, that would be, we need Cindy too, or we need Susie too.
It's fun to see everyone.
Well, so while we're waiting for Susie, maybe I'll just welcome everyone here. I think I haven't. I've been in a couple larger Zoom meetings like this. I haven't actually run one myself, so I'm kind of figuring it out as I go here. Got Aaron as my backup, and I think it's really awesome that Cindy, Mary Jo, and Susie all volunteered to be on the spot and talk a little bit about what they've learned about gardening in Seldovia. And I think I'm hoping that after we have those presentations and any question and answer, that there'll be some room also just for discussion for anyone to share whatever they feel like would be useful. So,
Brett, can we just do a quick review just in terms of everybody, if you would mute your audio, and then on your Zoom, if you scroll around, you should be able to see a chat icon, and inside of there you can chat the group or you can chat people individually.
and I'd also
I'm smiling at everybody, all those great faces I'm seeing.
And I would also say that for anyone who does have a particularly quiet backdrop, which is not me, but it's fine to have that the audio going, because then it is nice as a speaker or whatever to hear when someone, like, whatever, laughs a little bit or just a tiny bit of background noise does help you understand that, yeah, there are actually people out here listening. It can be a little bit disconcerting to be presenting to an empty room, to your computer or whatever.
So Brett, if I can model, there's also reactions. You can click on the reactions button and you can do a hand clap or you can do a thumbs up. But please just note that if other people's things are not muted, what happens is we stop hearing you.
Yeah, we want minimum of background noise. That would be great. Using the reactions sounds good. And I see Susie did get on. You're coming through well. Do you know how to share your screen, Susie? We'll just check on that real quick before I let Cindy start here.
Is there a button I need to push?
Down on the
Walk me through it.
The laptop, or if it's a computer, it should be down on the bottom. There should be a green button with an up arrow that says share screen.
Okay, well, I lost you. It's back to launching.
You're still coming through for us.
Oh, well, I lost your picture now, so
we're probably in the background.
Susie, yeah. Do you actually need to share your screen, or were you just planning to show us some video of your greenhouse with you demonstrating?
Yeah, I was gonna just show you a few examples of some things.
Okay, in person. If you're doing it just with your video is coming through great. So you don't.
Okay, well, I can't see myself to know if I'm on the screen, and I don't know what to do because I'm not very technical.
Is it a Mac?
No.
No.
Nope.
Your video is coming through very nicely right now for all of us. So.
All right. Well, it's probably better that I don't see myself. So I'll just, you let me know when it's my turn, and I'll just listen in.
Okay. Yeah, and we were just going through, just to recap for the people who just joined at the end, there should be a mute button in the bottom left, and unless my advice was a little bit of noise now and then can be okay, but as Laurel points out, it can, if there's any significant amount, it will actually cut out the audio for the presenter. So generally you should be muted while the presenter is going. And I think we can go ahead and start with Cindy now, if you're ready.
Great.
Oh, Cindy is muted.
Yes, I am ready. I had to unmute myself, though. Hi, everybody. It's so cool to see you all tuned in. And my parents and my brother are here, so that's especially exciting for me that they get to meet some of my Seldovia pals. So I'll just go ahead and share my screen, which hopefully will work. Does that look good to everybody? Yes? Okay. I can only see Hig and Susie and Laurel's screens right now, so the thumbs up kind of deal. Okay, perfect. And Hig, if you want to just give me signals or whatever, if things aren't working, let me know. Okay, and I'm going to set a timer to keep me on track, hopefully. So this is just a reminder that even though nothing is green yet here, this is what things will look like by August if we do a good job in our gardens. Oops. Now I hit a snag because I'm trying to use my arrows to navigate through PowerPoint. Oh, there we go. I'm not sure how that worked. Anyway, before I forget, I wanted to say thank you to all of these people. Hopefully I didn't forget anybody, but I've had this amazing miracle where I have a garden and I don't own any land. And that's because of Jim Hopkins and Stan and Rebecca. They've let me have gardens on their property. And then Tobin and Tanya and Joe have just been absolutely instrumental in getting me up and running. Susie, I've gotten soil and fertilizer and books and all kinds of great stuff from her. And Sue let me store my potatoes in her basement this past year. So, so that was great. Hig didn't actually introduce the CATS, which is the Climate Action Team Seldovia, who is hosting this whole thing. But I thought it would be good to throw in this slide of the climate outlook for this summer. This coming month of May is supposedly going to be hot and dry. But then good news, even though heat is predicted for May, June, and July, its precipitation map, which is in the lower right, shows that we should have normal precipitation, which I really hope is true. But just in case, this is a really great practice to get your water barrels set up. This is Stan and Rebecca's place with the big barrels. I took this photo yesterday, so we're ready to go. And then on the right side is my little rig that I set up here on my gutter. August 30th was the first time it rained since like May last year. One of the tips I wanted to share with you is these row cover things. This is my garden out at the community garden, and I use this stuff. My garden is in the front here, and then there's a halfway point, an invisible line down the middle, and this is Joe's garden beyond, and then Mary Joe's is on the other side of this little fence. And this stuff, row cover cloth, is absolutely amazing. It warms up the soil and I think helps germinate seeds. It's really cool. These pictures I took yesterday over at Stan and Rebecca's in my in-town garden. And this is fabric cover that I used last year. So it's got some holes pecked in it from the birds, but I think it might be usable for a second season. And what was amazing was I went over and I planted my seeds last spring, and I rode my bike home, and Rebecca posted a video or sent me a video of the stellar jays and magpies eating all the seeds I had just put in. So this little cold frame type thing, the row cover cloth, is pretty awesome for keeping the birds out. And probably cats and stuff too, like if you have an in-town garden. It seems pretty expensive, $229 for a 6x500 foot roll. But I did the math, and math people correct me if I did the math wrong, but 8 cents a square foot for this, ordered from the Wagon Wheel. I got this off the Wagon Wheel's website. And Then I looked on Amazon just out of curiosity. And of course, none of the units are the same. It's 83 inches wide instead of 6 feet wide. But hopefully I did the math right again. And that's 15 cents a square foot to get it from Amazon. So here's the wagon wheel price. And I don't know if Susie has this stuff available to sell. She probably could. But if anybody wants to go in on a roll, a 500-foot roll of row cover fabric, I need some more for this year. So that's a topic we can chat about maybe at the end. Another thing that I've found pretty good success with is using a cover crop. You can see this looks like grass in the front half of the garden here. This is winter rye that I got from Johnny's seed catalog. And I think we got one, I can't remember if we got 1 pound or 5 pounds, probably 5 pounds. Had plenty left over. I wanted to go back a slide, but I'm not sure how to do it. Oh, there we go. This didn't germinate that well. I don't know if I planted it late, but I've used this in other gardens in other parts of the country, and it keeps the weeds down. It's a green manure. It's really awesome. Here's the page of all the different cover crops that Johnny sells. And I picked winter rye because it has this low germination temperature, and it's good to zone 3, which most of the rest of them, if you can see those numbers, they're for warmer climates. And alfalfa and clover and vetch are all potentially invasive plants in our area. So I wanted to avoid those. Anyway, cover crops are great. So row cover cloth and cover crops. And one other thing, I found it really useful to keep a journal, or at least write down notes of what I planted, how much I planted. Like this year I'm going, how many potatoes do I need to plant? I didn't write it down. So that's a really important thing. This is just an example of what I've grown in my garden in the last couple years. And I'll tell you, this is Joe's onion. And if he was watching right now, he would be upset that I stole his giant onion. But I wanted to show like how big some of our vegetables can get. And these are seed sources that I have used or I plan to use. I've been using Johnny's for years and years until this year I realized they're expensive and they're in Maine. So some of the farms I worked on in the past used Johnny's. So I've just kind of been loyal to that company. We have our own seed company here in Alaska called Denali Seed, which I ordered their seeds for this year back in January, I think. And the 2 Synergy Gardens is in Homer, and they have garlic, which I'm hoping to plant this fall from them. And then I just discovered this Dixondale Farms from Texas. They've been raising onions and leeks and shallots for over 100 years. So they do carry some northern varieties. And then, of course, we have Time on the Boardwalk right here. So Susie sells seeds and all kinds of other good stuff, starts. She'll tell us about that, I hope. These are all the different things that I have grown in Seldovia. Some of them, like beets and lettuce, I have failed pretty badly. But these things, carrots, onions, and potatoes, have turned out pretty great for me. So I'm planning to share with you, and I'm a little bit over halfway through my talk. The carrot slide was my cue to be halfway done. This is my whole carrot harvest. I left some in the ground, which are still out there, the ones that are under the word September, that I'm hoping to go out and dig up. Probably should do it now. I bet I could get to them. But this is the product of 2 whole bags of packets of seed. So that's what 2 packets of carrot seeds should look like. These are the varieties I used, and they were from Johnny's Seed Company. Honestly, I couldn't tell. I wrote down where I planted them when which varieties, but then when I dug them up, of course, they all got mixed together. So I don't know which is which. And of course, I had to harvest everything and get out of town because I was on my way to France. And so I may have left them in longer than September 8th, but I didn't have a choice. So we were still really low on water. So I rinsed them in rainwater to get all that dirt off. And here's my quick and dirty notes about storage. And the key to carrots, I think, is high humidity. You want to store them at 98% humidity and in a well-ventilated place. I tried using damp sawdust. I used a 5-gallon bucket, drilled holes in it. It already had a leak, so I didn't feel too bad about doing that. And then I lined the whole thing with cheesecloth and put the carrots in there with damp sawdust as kind of an experiment to see how would this work. And then I stored this whole thing in Sue Slew's basement, which she told me stayed 40 degrees, which I thought would be pretty good. Unfortunately, it was like 55 degrees in her basement. And so all my potatoes and all my carrots were really warm for a couple of months. So I'm not sure how the experiment really turned out. I want to try again with some cooler storage this coming winter. Okay, moving on to onions. I have learned a heck of a lot about onions in the last year. One was that onion sets are meant for filling in that gap in the beginning of the season. So we could go out as soon as the soil's warm enough, get our onion sets, pop them in there, and then we have onions that we can eat in June, maybe, beginning of July. These, I didn't know it until 2 years ago, I guess. They are not meant for storage. So I harvested them, had them nice cured, put them away, and then they all started to rot in the center and they didn't hold over well. And so that was a good experience because now I know you need to plant onion plants if you want to store your onions. You can get these from a bunch of different suppliers. I ordered them from Johnny's last year and I'm getting them from that place in Texas this year. So we'll see how they turn out. And onions need a lot of water. So my onion crop last year didn't turn out so great because it was really, really dry.
I'm just going to interject a little bit. I think that might be
yeah.
Perhaps.
Might be a what?
Might be what we're hearing in the background. I'm wondering if she could mute herself.
It sounded like somebody trying to start up a Model A Ford or something like that.
Or a pencil sharpener.
Oh, a pencil sharpener. Okay. All right. And I guess I'll keep talking. The other thing I learned about onions is that there are different varieties based on the length of the day, your latitude, basically. And so this map, which is from the place in Texas, they don't even include Alaska on it, but we need to grow long day onion varieties in the far north because the bulbing, the development of the onion bulb is based on day length. So when you pick out your varieties, you want to pay attention to that. And these are all varieties that are long day varieties. I got these latitudes out of the Johnny's catalog, and I've grown Patterson, Ailsa Crag, and Red Wing here, and they have all done really well. I still have Red Wing onions left from this past year, so they store really nicely. Walla Walla I'm getting this year, and we'll try to grow those. And Sierra Blanca is a white, mild white onion that might grow well here. I have not tried that one, so but these all are good varieties for Seldovia. And this is the farm in Texas, and they have lots and lots of onion information on there. And they also sell leek plants and shallot plants. So I recommend it even as a source of information. If you don't buy anything from them, it's a great place to check out what to do with onions. Okay, here's the storage for onions. And one thing I didn't know, so again, something else I learned about onions is they have to be cured before you store them. So that just means that they need to be dried, right?
Yeah.
At 80 degrees. Where are you going to get 80 degrees in Seldovia for a week? Well, I think Allison Ryan is tuned in to this program. I borrowed her car last summer, and this is me hauling kelp from the beach. I used a brand new tarp so it wouldn't leak. But I also cured my onions in the back of her car. So I put them in there and left the windows mostly rolled up and just put a blanket or something lightweight over them so they didn't get sunburned. And that seemed to really do the trick, to just get them nice and dry and get them warm. And this is my kind of final, just letting them dry out a bit more before I put them away. That's not my whole harvest, but the ones in the front are the Patterson, and the ones in the back are the Red Wing onions. Okay, potatoes. Potatoes are awesome. Potatoes are like, onions are complicated. You wouldn't think, they're such an easy thing to go and buy a bag of at the grocery store, but there's a lot to know about onions, so they turn out. Potatoes are very forgiving, and you just plop them in the ground and look at what they give back. It's so cool. This is my harvest from 2019. Walt and Sachiko probably don't know that I used their barn while they were away traveling to cure my potatoes, because potatoes need to be cured too. I would definitely recommend washing the potatoes before you try to cure them. I didn't, and when I harvested them, they had, some of them were coated with mud and they took forever to dry out. So even though people say you can store them without washing them, it just takes a much longer process. The varieties are, all the potatoes that I grow are potatoes that I got from Joe Fleckenstein. So I don't know technically what the varieties are for the Redskin and the Russet and the Purple. Myrna and Peanut are variety names. So these are all really great potatoes for Seldovia. I don't know if there are other varieties that will do well here too. There probably are, I would bet. And this little, I don't know, I couldn't do a PowerPoint without some kind of a spreadsheet. So here's my report card for the potatoes. Yukon Gold, of course, do fantastic in Seldovia. The purples and the Redskins, all three of those were really great, even last year in the drought. One thing I have noticed is that they haven't stored as well, and I wonder if all the potatoes simply had a lower level of moisture in them at the end of the season when they got harvested, because they all are a little bit shriveled this year, even the ones that I kept in my refrigerator. The Peanut and Myrna potatoes really don't store very well, but that's okay because you eat those first and they're gone by, December or whenever. The Myrnas have had tendency to get these little red worms in them, and I'm not sure what that's about. I haven't done the research on it, but that's the only, knock on wood, the only pest I've had so far with any of the potatoes. And then Joe got some German butterball potatoes from Jeff Babbitt, the Veggie Bus guy. And I think Joe grew some of those this past summer. I don't know how they turned out for him. So that's a question. And Joe is the potato man. Like, if you want to know anything about potatoes, ask him, because he's into it. This this is just a quick shot of them, what they look like when they're washed. They're really pretty. And this past year, after they were all nice and dry, I boxed them up and I put them in these burlap sacks that I got from the wagon wheel. And I hauled all this stuff over to Sue Sleuth's house. I don't have a scale, so I don't know how many pounds of potatoes that was, but I shared a lot, and I'm still eating some, the reds and the purples. I still have some left. So that got me through the whole winter. It's pretty amazing. As far as storage goes, I think I already talked about all that stuff. Oh, except it's really important to keep your potatoes in a dark place, because when they turn green, the green is just chlorophyll, that won't hurt you or do anything. But solanine is a toxin that's associated with the changes that happen in a potato when it turns green, and that can really cause some problems. So you definitely want to keep your potatoes in a dark spot. This is where I live, and I cannot have a root cellar here for obvious reasons. So one of the things that I would really like to talk about as the climate action team, and maybe as the garden club, and as a community, is food security. You know, we're seeing right now, and last summer when we had some problems with the wildfires, getting food here shipped in from other places. Great, if we can grow our own and then store it. And the Drawdown, Paul Hawken book, his ~1 climate action item was refrigeration. And he didn't want to talk about it. He said, it's not a sexy topic. He didn't want to spend much time on it. But I think, and if I want to unshare my screen, root cellars, let me see if I can get back. Oh, I wanted to just show you a shot of when you Google root cellars. Sorry, I'm having a little trouble figuring out how to get to. It'll happen. Here we go. Check these things out. I mean, they are so cool. It looks like where hobbits would live or something. I mean, there's so many different styles. There's tons and tons of information online, diagrams, blueprints, technical stuff. Here's like a super industrial professional type looking one. There's some that look like what Hig would do, digging a hole in the earth. Anyway, I think it would be so great to have, this looks kind of Seldovia style, this one right here to me, to have one of these here. And it would not work out at the community garden because it would fill up with water. But maybe there's some other place in town where we could have a root cellar and then be able to store our food. And that's it. So I don't know how you want to do questions, Hig, if we want to wait till the very end, or if I think
an interlude for questions would be good.
Okay.
If anyone wants to jump in and ask. But first of all, though, thank you. That was great, Cindy.
Yeah.
Laws is difficult, but anyway. But yeah, are there any questions?
Well, I'll start with one here next to Hig, which is where's a good place to get potatoes if we forgot to save any from last year because we left for the winter?
That's a great question. And Caleb Billmeyer beat you to it by 48 hours or so. He sent me a text and said, do you have any seed potatoes available? If you guys remember, we had that spring swap last year, and I brought some seed potatoes, and I was selling them for $4 a pound. I have a little bit left this year, not really very much, but if you want purple potatoes or red skin potatoes, I have maybe a pound of each that I locally here that I could we could swap or barter, or you could buy them from me. But yeah, just Google lots of garden places sell those, and Susie might have a clue on that. I don't know if the wagon wheel. The problem that's happening right now with the COVID-19 thing is that people who've never gardened before have bought up all the seed, and the seed suppliers, like on the Johnny's website, they are only selling to commercial operations right now. They're not doing retail because they couldn't fill all the orders. So I'd say start with Susie, then go to the wagon wheel. Oops, sorry, go ahead, Erin.
I just say I'd love to take the red and purple ones off your hands for whatever you want to sell them for, the extra.
Okay, great. I could maybe do half a pound of each, because otherwise I'm gonna run out. I won't have enough to plant, but we'll chat about that after.
Are there other questions?
I'd like to.
On the potatoes.
Let's do
ahead,
Byron. Let's do Byron first, and then whoever was next, maybe Rebecca.
Okay. Okay, thanks, Cindy. So carrots. Our experience was the converse of yours. We always struggled with carrots. Our beets were world class this year, both the regular purple and the yellow. Regarding carrots, did you import any sand from the beach? Because you always hear with carrots that the soil has to drain well and it needs to be sandy. At least that's what I've heard from multiple people over the years. What did you do as far as the soil? Over.
I did not do anything special with the soil for the carrots. They were just happy out there. I think the most important thing with carrots that I have found is you have to thin them. If you don't thin them, they are not going to do well. You won't get a nice straight long big carrot. But yeah, as far as soil goes, I'm really fortunate. I don't know the exact history of that spot, but where the community garden is next to Javon and Elena's was an old farm. And so I think that my garden, my spot, I know the soil isn't very good in other places out there. My soil is pretty nice. So, but no, I didn't add any sand for the carrots.
I think one of the key things is to make sure that you have fine soil without rocks.
Yes. Yeah, because the rocks, then you get all these deformed, weird shaped, sort of artistic looking carrots.
I don't know if you guys noticed on the chat thing that Jerry and Sandy Murray said to check with Anchor Point greenhouses for potato starts.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yeah.
I don't thin my carrots and they come out really good.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Ever.
Some of them are twisted around each other, but they're all about 6-8 inches long and beautiful carrots.
Okay, all right.
He doesn't notice how his wife sneaks out and thins them to eat them as we're going along.
Right. Well, and I think that is sometimes people are so tender-hearted that they can't stand, killing a plant that's, no, there's nothing wrong with it. But I just look at it as editing, right? So you just edit out the ones that are in between. And maybe, I did work on a produce farm and I was trained how to thin carrots and beets and different plants. And if you had to do it. And I kind of like doing it. I don't mind sacrificing those few so that the good ones, that are left turn out.
I can speak to that. One of the things that I do, because it's difficult for me also to thin carrots, so I'll go out when my carrots come up with a pencil. And just like I'm taking vegetables from a seed starting medium with a pencil and easing up the root and putting them into a 4-cell pack, I'll take that row and each of the carrots that I pull up with a pencil, I just go you know, an inch over, make a hole and drop that seedling in that I just thinned out, and it just
Yeah.
right into my row. So I don't really lose a lot of carrots by throwing them over my shoulder and thinning. I just spread them right there in the row. And
Yeah.
they're perfectly fine as long as you're not doing it on a sunny day.
Mhm. That's a great idea.
Susie turned me on to ya carrots. They do very well here. They're hard seeds to get, but they germinate well, and they really get big and nice.
I'm gonna jot that down because I've just ordered different varieties for this year that I haven't tried yet. A lot of the carrot variety names are French, so I don't know if the French have done a lot of carrot cultivation. I don't associate carrots with France, but maybe they do.
Yeah.
Rebecca, did you have a? Oh, sorry.
I had a question. It was about the potatoes. And when I saw the photo of yours there, when we harvested our Yukon Golds and our Reds, we just, as soon as we took them out of the ground, they had that little black crusty patches all over them. And you were saying that might have been because of mud. Is anybody there have experience with that last summer? I'd never seen that on my potatoes before.
I think that's called scab.
Okay, and what causes that?
It's a bacteria that gets in your soil, and generally what they say is do not use last year's potatoes to replant. The Extension Service wants everybody to use new seed potato that's, you know, scab free to plant, and once you have it in your soil, you're stuck with it. So what they'll say is, once you've got it, you need to move your potato patch and plant something else there next year.
Yeah, and those were actually brand new seed potatoes. But yeah, if that's in the soil, that's good to know.
Yeah, if it's in the soil, it'll pick it up. And somebody gave us some potatoes last year, and I forgot all about that and planted them. Sure enough, when I pulled them all up, they all had scab on them. So now I'm kind of going, okay, now I got to switch potato spots again.
Well,
So.
I didn't know what it was. I was making sure I peeled it off. But is there anything wrong with it?
It's harmless. It just looks terrible, but you know, it
doesn't
problem.
Reduce the taste of the potato.
Yeah. No. Yeah.
Just boil them up.
They just weren't as pretty.
No, they're not as pretty, but they're fine. You know, you can eat them without any problem.
Okay, thanks.
Could I ask a quick question here, because the potatoes have brought up the issue, I think, of crop rotation. I thought that in general we are encouraged to not plant the same thing in the same place year after year. Now I know Larry's probably going to tell me that's exactly what he does, but anyway, that's the question. I think you understand. Thanks.
So one thing that I know about potatoes is is that they actually prefer, let me see if I get this right, they prefer a more acidic soil. And so in my garden, I have rotated everything all around, but I have thought that it would be, I think I read it somewhere, it would be really great to have a potato patch where you get the soil into the condition that the potatoes prefer, which is more acidic, and you plant half of it in potatoes and you plant the other half in a cover crop or leave it fallow, and then just rotate within your potato patch so that the rest of your other garden, for all your other vegetables that don't like acidic soil, you can build the soil up so that the pH is more preferable for those vegetables. You know, you start to end up needing a lot of land to do all that. And I'm not sure if there are some potato pests that would end up in your potato patch if you only ever grew potatoes and not other stuff. But
I don't know if you
Yeah.
can see.
They look like little blobs. There's no
Oh.
detail.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, it's definitely a bacteria.
So it is 3:45 right now. So I think if
Yeah, I was thinking we
I don't want to take over for you, Hig, but maybe time to move to the next.
I wonder if we should go to Susie next because her video is working great, and then we'll maybe.
Mine is too. I'm here.
Oh, hey, yeah, there you are. Oh,
Yeah, there's a picture and everything.
You put a background up.
This might be a good time because mine's very short. I can give an update on the community garden.
Okay, sure.
Okay, and I'm sure most everybody that's on here, but maybe there's some that are not participating that don't know where the community garden is, and it is out on the Frank Raby Road heading out to the dump. And if you know where Javon and Elena live, it is right next to them, as Cindy said. Right now, out there, we have 6 parcels that are open for people. One of them was just taken this morning, so we now have 5 parcels left. People should be aware that there is water out there. There is a creek to take water from if you would like to, but otherwise there is no water presently. Jim Hopkins, who owns the property, and as Cindy also mentioned, he's been great to allow us to farm out there on his land. He's talking about putting in a surface well, a culvert. However, to do that, he would also need to child protect the culvert and probably build some type of structure over it so we wouldn't have neighbor children and other children, pets, whatever, falling in, jumping in. And he said it could also have a pump, but then that would mean electricity. We have a source out there, but then that would mean a bill to pay for the electric. And so the people that are out there working in the garden may or may not want to look at that. But right now, in order for you to have water for the garden, if you plan to have a parcel out there, you do need to be able to provide your own water source for that. Jim does have a rototiller that he's willing to share with anybody who is out there. So if you plan to rototill your garden, he's more than willing to lend that out to anybody who's there. Yeah, which is very nice, I think.
Yeah.
So it's pretty short. You know, in terms of my part of the presentation, Jim is still the head honcho, but he gets very busy in the summer, and he just asked me to do some of the finer details, like talking to people that would like a plot out there. And people can also choose to share a plot if they want to. I've had some interest in people wanting to share and to put in potatoes. They're looking for space to raise potatoes. So that's also a possibility.
And is the process to get a plot, is that basically just talk to you? Is that?
They just need to talk to me, and I'm pretty much first come, first serve. I think there were some people that did talk to me last fall when we were harvesting out there, and I've tried to contact them, and I have. And so the one plot that left was a person who was interested from last year. And I have Susie's woofer who's interested in a plot, and I plan to talk to him. So he's next on my list if he chooses to take one of those, because 2 of the plots out there were worked from last year. They were Kristen's garden. I called it the folk garden, where she used willow branches to fence it off and to make stakes and do everything. It was a beautiful little garden, but she got a job in Colorado and had to leave before she could do much of anything with it. And she asked me to watch the garden for her. And as you remember, there was not much water. So the plants that were looking good, I helped them along, and the others just had to do their best. But she did end up with a nice crop, I thought, considering, you know, not much work was put into it. But at least that parcel was worked. You know, the sticks and stones were taken out of it, and good soil was brought in to add to the good soil that was already there. So those are nice plots. And if you've driven out there recently, you'll see a huge mound of soil that George Oliveira, who's now working for Jim Hopkins, Jim had him bring it in. And that will be for the people that choose to put a garden out there. There's some extra soils that they can add, because some of those plots other than the one, they're rough. You know, there's all kinds of rocks and twigs and branches and things in the soil. So they would need to be improved upon. Those plots would need to be improved upon, and then some soil added to it.
That new soil pile looks pretty good from a distance. I haven't
It
gone
is
up
very good.
stuck my hands in it, but it looks better than what was there naturally. Yeah, and from the old farm. Yeah.
And even for the plots that Joe and Cindy and I have been on, I don't know how much Cindy added to it, but Jim has been bringing soil out from different places to amend the soil that's already there. And I think it's made a big difference, you know, in the soil.
And just a thought, you know, if you have limited land, you can always grow potatoes vertically, you know, in a tube or whatever, where you keep adding dirt and it just gets deeper and deeper and taller, and you can save space that way and then have room for some other things.
And there is some property. We haven't divided it up yet in terms of plots for other people to take at this time, because we're still considering what to do with it. But at one point we were going to put in a high tunnel, and in order to do that, we have to, you know, prove up the property with planted areas. And so we were hustling to get some plants in there, and we have really good soil for potatoes. I had 4 totes of potatoes that I planted here at home, and I took those out, but they'd only been in the totes for maybe 5 weeks, and there were already potatoes growing. And out of 4, and I'm not talking big totes, I'm talking regular small totes, those 4 totes, we were able to do 45 feet of potatoes in a run. And so that was a lot of potatoes when they finally were harvested. So it's good soil for the potatoes. I did have something I was going to mention to Cindy when she was talking about the beets, though. I'll throw it in out there. The beets out there in my plot grew really well this last summer. And what I saw is something I have never seen before growing beets, is, you know, the beets were getting really large and they were starting to pop up out of the ground, which was fine. I kept covering them up, but when I went to harvest them, I discovered that my beets had grown down so deep into the soil that my beets were growing beets. I had beets coming off of my main beet plant that I had never seen before. So one beet, I had probably 3 or 4 extra beets on them that were at least 5-6 inches long, in addition to those. And I didn't know, yeah, that was very strange.
I've been disappointed because I have grown beets in other places at other times that were fantastic, and just the last 2 years, I don't know. I know this past year they got sunburned and not enough water, but otherwise, I don't know. I may give up and just not do it, spend more space on something else.
Maybe they need something opposite to carrots, because I also have great carrots and terrible beets. So I don't know.
Well, maybe we can work out some kind of sharing out there.
Yeah, yeah,
that would be a lot of
definitely.
fun.
I think a veggie swap would be great.
And something else for you and Joe too, you know, there's a good possibility that a greenhouse will be coming in. It isn't going to be a high tunnel, but Ed Packer, when he comes back, is planning to bring a greenhouse that he just happened to have, bring it up with him to put in that area right behind where my garden is right now, which is in between that and the big potato field in the back. So we'll see if that happens this year. These are all projects for probably the next couple of years, but it would be nice to have something out there that we could also keep some tools in and, you know, not have to be lugging them along.
Brett, could you add Crystal back in, please?
Oh, sorry.
Thank you. She changed locations.
And that reminds me of Crystal's back in there because she may want to speak to this. A few weeks ago, I talked to Crystal about the community garden that is out Jackaloff Road. I think she said it's at about 2.5 mile Jackaloff. And
yeah, it's at 2.5.
2.5, yeah, 2.5. Okay. And she was more than, receptive to anybody who would like to come into that particular community garden. And as I understand, there is a well out there, a culvert well that
There
was
is,
put
and
in.
Byron and Tanya have both
Mhm.
worked out there on that garden, and
Right.
Crystal's planted stuff as well. And yeah, that definitely is an available resource.
Right. But I didn't want to leave that out. But it was nice to know that that was still available. I know where it is, but I didn't know much about it or if anybody had been using it these last couple of years. But she said not so much last year, but that she would be into seeing other people using it.
I think Tanya has info on that.
All right, good.
Yeah, the Janeka, we have, am I showing up? Yeah, we have a raised bed that actually Byron made for us about 3 or 4 years ago. And it's just a wonderful exposure up there. It's just a really peaceful, sunny place to be when you're working in the garden. And the only downside is that the soil that's there is not very good soil and not very rich. So over the years, we've been adding fishy peat to our one raised bed and we get a good harvest. So if that's an option to others around town and it's closer to where you live and stuff, it's a really nice place.
Excellent.
I could help with maybe with a root cellar out. We're not that far from there, and got the hole. It doesn't have a purpose. We could reinforce that into a root cellar like Cindy was picturing.
You're mine.
Yeah, well, it's not even, it's even like you could access it without having to go, right into our yard. It's just down the driveway from us. I don't know. Happy to have a conversation.
So one thing about that is access for people who are in town who don't have a vehicle. And it was pretty fun this winter. I'd go grocery shopping and I would take my snow shovel and I'd go over to Sue Slew's and dig the snow out. And she's right across from me, but I didn't have my boat in the water. So I had to walk all the way around over to her house and then carrying a 5-gallon bucket of carrots or whatever back with me. I mean, it was pretty hard. If I had skis and a pulk or something, but I could just see that as maybe an issue of coming all 2 miles out to South Boone to pick up your vegetables, which, I mean, it still would be great. And thank you. I know how you like to dig holes, so it'd be cool to turn it into that. Yeah. But yeah, it would be great to have, ideally you'd have your root cellar right there next to the garden. But based on our flooding this past fall or December, it was December when there was water over the road. It's not going to work out in that location.
That water table is only a 1.5 foot, 2 feet below that community garden.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can't go down. And it's all gravel, so it's like the whole area is permeated with water. That whole old farm was filled in over a swamp.
Right.
Yeah, Harold Backer's old farm.
Do we want to jump along to Susie's presentation here? Well, and then we can circle around with more conversation and ideas after that, I think.
Okay, that'd be great because I'm in my greenhouse and I did not bring a cord with me, but I just want to kind of pan the greenhouse. If you can see how much I have in it, it is loaded to the gills. And then I have it, not very good at panning, I guess. Anyway, I have my upper greenhouse full too. I grew a lot of vegetables this year. I grew a lot of different varieties of the same things. So I just wanted to introduce Allison Ryan. She's that's one of the squares there, and she is busily working at transplanting lettuce seedlings right now. Show us what you're working on, Allison.
Let's see here. Maybe I can pop.
Can you hold up your little germination tray?
Is that Allie's own?
Working very hard at filling up the greenhouse here from the germination trays of every variety imaginable. So a couple of things that I wanted to respond to that were spoken of earlier. The soil pile at the community gardens. We took a bucket of that to look at it, and it is like really dense water holding mud soil. So that soil is really going to need amendments of whatever you can put in it, from chainsaw clippings to kelp to leaves that have been bagged up. Leaves make wonderful compost, except for, I understand, the cottonwood trees, those leaves you need to leave alone because the cottonwoods have something in the leaves that deters growth. So don't use the cottonwood leaves. But all of that needs to be added to that soil. And that soil can become good, but it may take a good year to make it lighter because it's dense and wet and it's full of rock. So here at the nursery, I have a lot of new things this year that I'm really excited about. I've always carried row cover in rolls. I have a few seed packets of crop covers that you could use if you want to do a crop cover on part of your garden. I'm looking into soil options, and so I have Allison, if you can hear me, would you look in the laundry room above the washing machine and bring me an extension cord, because I have a low battery reading on my computer now. And then I can plug in here in the greenhouse. So hopefully you won't lose me, but I'll plug in if I have to run and get it myself. So so I'm ordering a pallet of 11-pound condensed bricks of coconut coir, and each 11-pound brick takes 11 to 12 gallons of water to rehydrate it. So you put it in your wheelbarrow and you mix the water in it, and then it pulls apart and it'll fill it'll totally overfill the wheelbarrow. It's almost as much as you get in a bale of
Did we lose Susie? I think
Her battery died.
Yeah, I think that was the end of the battery there. Well, maybe she'll be back here in a minute. I'll keep an eye out to make sure to let her back in.
In the meantime, Brett, I think we've got about 30 participants today. It's pretty exciting.
Yeah, it says 20. 20 is the number of actual different accounts here, and I know several of them more than one person, and so. I think it's been really, really great conversation too going on, and great ideas. One of the things I think is really neat, and I'm listening to here, is that there is a huge amount of knowledge and a huge amount of experiments that are going on, and like you could probably add another 10 people who would have a whole other set of perspectives, and it's really great. Hopefully this is adds into the many opportunities we have to kind of share knowledge and such, and improve our ability to garden here and grow food.
Which is super timely in regards to the coronavirus pandemic and just a heightened desire for folks to see locally grown food, being sustained. And just note that the Food Hub, they're having their monthly meeting right now, I think, in fact, but they will be doing Seldovia orders again and starting up in late May. So, and Seldovia Village Tribe will have Robbie Mixon doing a healthy chatter around the 3rd week of May, I believe.
May 22nd, to be exact.
Perfect. Thanks,
which
Brett.
is also the day the hub opens up for Seldovia.
Yeah, one question I had on listening to Cindy talking about onions is I wonder if anyone has experimented with the local onions, because we do have local wild onions here. They're not real common, but I know a few places where they grow. But I've never talked to anyone who's tried cultivating them, and I don't know. Yeah, at least for greens and stuff, maybe there'd be advantages to using those.
So I know we have a native chive. Is that what you're talking about?
I mean, it's, I don't know if there's it could be. I don't know if there's a strict definitional difference between the chive and the onions, but it's got a fairly fat stem, a little fatter than what I'd think of as a chive.
Huh. I don't know what plant you're talking about, but I have, as my foundation under my computer, I have the Flora of Alaska, which is a big, thick book. And I'll just look in there right now while you guys are.
You know, Brett, Doug had one of those wild onions down at the harbor growing, and it got quite big, and it was a perennial that came back every year. I'll have to look and see if it's still there.
I know where some wild ones are. They're not real super convenient though.
Yeah, most of the ones I know are pretty far out there. They grow like in wetland soils.
Barabra Creek and Seldovia Lake.
Seldovia Lake. I've seen them up at Portlock Plateau, and I think I've seen them somewhere else in the state park too. But yeah, I'm trying to remember where I was coming.
Well, you know, Doug wandered everywhere and gathered from here and there, and couldn't remember exactly, at least he wouldn't tell me, where he got it from. But it was there, and it came back every year. So it is something to, as you're walking by there, to look for this summer.
Yeah, well, is there anyone who just wants to either ask a question for someone who's already spoken, or if they just have something they want to share themselves here?
Oh, quiet. Here's my.
Oh, sorry, I was just going to read the onion thing. What do you got?
This is the cabbage that we ate, and I kept the cabbage core, and then I just put it in water, and it grew roots, and now it's growing a whole other plant.
My mom's been doing that too, actually.
Recycled my vegetable.
Leaves off of. My mom's been harvesting leaves off of leftover brassicas from last year.
Yeah.
Nice. So I have a question about what you're doing. Last year was a really bad slug year for our kale. And even though it was really dry, the slugs really got the very first shoots of leaves that came up. And it seems as though after the yearlings came up, after the seedlings came up, and then the ones that survived came back, and the slugs didn't seem to bother them. And I don't know what it was, but I thought the whole kale crop was going to be decimated, but it did come back, but it wasn't as good as years before. And I don't know why the slugs chose the kale last year and they left other things alone, but the beets were great and everything else. So anybody have any experience like that?
Something that slugs really like, if you want to have want to sacrifice one crop, is they love bok choy. They will have bok choy before they'll have kale or anything else. So if you want to just have some sacrificial lambs out there, we recommend bok choy.
Yeah, Napa cabbage, I think, is what we had, the same kind, which is very close to that, I think. So same kind of experience.
So I have a comment on the potato issue. You guys gave me an idea, and I looked it up about the drought we had, and it on the internet it does say that if you have a dry spell or they don't get much water about the time the tubers are forming, and then for about 5 to 6 weeks afterwards, that can encourage the scab growth. And guess what? That does kind of fit the timing of my potatoes last summer.
Yeah.
So I think Susie got back on here.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Okay. So I was talking about the coconut coir that I have coming in. My husband has been kind enough to do all my freight runs for me. And so hopefully this week I'll get that in. But one of the things that the coconut coir has been being used for in other places is people that have chicken coops. They are throwing the whole blocks into the coop, watering it, and then just being in the coop with the chickens urinating and water being spilled, and then the chickens scratching action. It opens up that block, and instead of using straw in their coops, they are using this coir, and then after the fact they are gathering it up and then mixing it with soil and growing in it. Many of the people up north of Anchorage in the valley are using this in their chicken coops, loving it and having really great results with their vegetables. It's also economical. I think the bricks are going to be $13.50, and you end up with this giant like ProMix bale size of material that you would need to add compost to enhance it because it doesn't have the nutrients in it, but you have really good growing medium for a good price, and you could take it someplace and add the water and create your mass of soil. I also have ordered in kelp powder that you mix with water, and fish powder that I'm experimenting with. I carry the roll cover in the greenhouse by the roll, as well as some seed packets of crop cover. They're in the large seed packets. I do carry the carrot seeds. I'm ordering them in from Park Seed Company because I have an account with them, and it was one of the places I could get them. They're a large volume of seed in those. So one packet would last you a couple of years. They're more expensive than my botanical interest seeds, but you end up with a lot more seed. I get my potato and onion sets each year from Pyra's Farm in the valley. And again, I will be relying on my wingman to fly me up there for those. But when that happens, I will post that on the chatterbox. I go the week before Mother's Day, but I'm going to try and go much earlier this year to get those my seed potatoes and onion sets. One of the things that I learned this year, I have a woofer. The woofer that's with me now has worked all of his life in organic farms, and he's into biodynamics. And so he's teaching me a lot of things, and one of which I'm going to share with you later. But I've always had a hard time germinating bunching onions in my garden. And so he has taught me that if you're going to grow bunching onions from seed for your green onions, they require warmth to germinate. So I always put them in my garden, and then they never germinate because it's cold, by the time I'm my early seeding. And then they get planted over or stomped on in the garden. I never get any bunching of onions. So this year I've seeded them inside, and I have them in the house seeding in a big window box tub where I'll continue to grow them out. They still haven't germinated, but I think maybe that's my problem and something new that I've learned this year. We are growing like 6 varieties of beets, and I grow magnificent beets in my upper garden. So if you haven't had luck with beets, Cindy, I say try again, because I have really good luck with beets.
Susie, I've done it both ways. I've done direct seeded last year, and I bought plants from you the year before. And both times they were about the same result. They just did not thrive. So maybe it has something to do with the soil out there. I don't know. It's weird.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe I'll try again. I'll buy a few. Yeah, I'll get some plants from you maybe.
The other thing that I buy every year from Dixondale Farms, which you showed, Cindy, is leek sets. Leek sets come in and they're skinny little things, like some of them a little bit bigger than pencil lead. And they're dried up and they look like they couldn't possibly grow, but they do grow. And they are extremely hardy, leeks are. I have some 6-packs, the large 6-cell packs up in my garden that weren't even covered in straw. And I planted those leek sets in them. They really didn't grow much, but they're still alive this year after going through this cold winter. So those are due in probably this week. And I'll have those available as well. They're fun to grow, leeks, if you haven't tried them. It doesn't look like my big leeks wintered, but some of my plants I can't tell yet in the garden if they have wintered. But the last 2 years, my leeks wintered over the winter, the milder last 2 winters. Lettuces, if you're having problems with lettuce, they don't like to grow in full sun. So always plant your lettuce where they're fairly shady. They get a little bit of morning sun or maybe just a little bit of evening sun, and that's all they need. They don't grow well in the heat of the harsh sun. So keep that in mind for lettuces. When we started turning the soil up in my upper vegetable garden, and we found 4 rutabagas that were in the ground that went through this winter, and I cooked them up and had them for dinner last night. They were delicious. And they just stayed in the ground all winter. I was going to show you what I've talked in the past on these gardening things, that when you grow your vegetables inside, the reason why you need a greenhouse is because you want to grow vegetable starts, if you're going to start them early, in the cool temperatures. So I started my squash plants, and for whatever reason, don't ask me why, I never took them to the greenhouse, because I had my tomato starts in the house and had my cucumber starts in the house because they don't like the cool greenhouse. And I left my squash plants in the house instead of, and see how they grew long and leggy like this? Normally right here where I have my fingers is what's sticking out of the ground, or maybe a 1/4 inch of this long stalk is what's supposed to be under the soil. But that's what happens to vegetables when you grow them at too warm of a temperature. And all your vegetables will do that. If you're growing broccoli or kale or anything. And that's why you use a greenhouse to start your plants, so that they grow short to the ground and the stems are strong and sturdy. So when this squash plant gets planted outside, I will plant it, or even if I plant it in a box, I'll plant it right up to these first set of leaves way up here, and all of this stem will go under the ground. What I really wanted to share today with you is something that I've learned from my woofer Joey. He's not here today because he went with Jerry to do a freight run, and he drove up to Anchor Greenhouse to get my pallet of Fishy Pete, and Jerry flew back with freight, and now the weather's down and Joey is in Anchor Point with a phone that doesn't work. So that's, otherwise I would have had him here. It's just the way the day worked to speak on the subject. But what he is teaching me to make is bacterias to put into the garden. The one that we made lactobacillus. And so to make a batch of lactobacillus, and lactobacillus is used as a detergent and a deodorizer, and he washes all his clothes in it. He bathes in it. He uses it for everything, and is just a proponent for always having a batch of it around. And we, the first batch we made, well, the only batch we've made so far, we put it in a sprayer and we sprayed down the entire greenhouse with it. So that all the plants were inoculated with it, because this lactobacillus eats the other bad bacteria, and it'll keep mold and fungus down. Mold is always an issue that I kind of have in the greenhouse. I'll get the little white fuzzy mold growing on some of my cells, and then I'll pinch it off with my fingers. I'll throw it in the garbage. I'll wash my hands just like I got coronavirus on them before I touch anything, because I don't want those mold spores spreading other places. But I battle it every spring because it's cold and it's moist in here from watering. And he says that lactobacillus I won't have any of that with that. So I'm experimenting with it, and I'm excited to learn new biodynamic techniques from somebody that's used it for a lifetime. He's 35 years old, but he's had lots of experience with it. So what he does, and you can Google this, and I can share after this meeting the site that I used, because I researched it after we made our batch and used it. You take any kind of rice and you wash it and maybe let it sit for a little bit, move it around in the water, and then you strain it off and you save that water. So you are getting the chaff from the rice, and you let that rice sit. Grab my other notes. You let that rice water sit at room temperature. Here we go. You cover it with either a paper towel or a cloth, and you let it sit at room temperature or a warm place, like maybe on top of your refrigerator. And it grows, you let it sit for, and you're supposed to mix it. Okay, so let me take a moment to look at my notes here. The site, if you want to make a note, is called dudebros.com. And they're a fully organic biodynamic site. It's a really interesting site to look at. So you soak this, you drain off the liquid from your rice. Then you cover it lightly with a cloth or a paper towel, and it's collecting bacteria out of the air. So just whatever is in your room collects in that water with the rice water, and you let it sit for 3 to 7 days. And after about 5 days, you'll start to notice that the water will separate into 3 very distinct levels in your jar. And we did it in a pickle jar, like a half-gallon pickle jar. So when that water starts to show the separation, they'll have 3, the top layer is kind of floaty solids, and sometimes there's a little bit of mold or funky stuff in it. The middle layer gets sort of cloudy, a cloudy liquid, and it's the lactobacillus and the native bacteria that's living in the room that has been drawn into this jar. The bottom is kind of a stinky solids, maybe some bits of the rice in it, and it's the waste product of the bacteria that's living in the middle layer. So when you see that your that your culture, it has separated into these 3 areas. Then you take a turkey baster and we sucked out that middle layer, which is where the bacteria is living. We didn't want the top layer of all that funky looking stuff, and we didn't want the bottom layer of those more funky little solid things. So we sucked out that middle layer. And then, okay, what did we do? So then we took another clear jar, a clean jar, and we put that middle layer into another jar with the turkey baster. And then we added a ratio of 1:4 milk, any kind of milk. We used box milk. That's shelf-stable box milk, but he said you could use any kind of animal milk, goat's milk, yak milk, whatever you had. Or you could buy just whatever you had in your fridge, your 2% or your whole milk. It's just you're taking the lacto out of the milk is what you're doing, and forming your own culture of lactobacillus. And so then we sealed the top because we had the lid for the jar, and we let that sit another 5 to 7 days, and we burped it twice a day, in the morning and the evening. Let out, just took the lid off, and then put the lid back on. And then it again formed 3 layers. The top layer was full of curds, just like if you were a cheesemaker. We pulled out those curds and we fed those to Allison's dog, Ranger. She loved them. And the bottom layer, again, is waste product from that bacteria that's living in there. And then we sucked out that middle layer again, which turns into all lactobacillus. And then we put that in our sprayer and we diluted it, 2 tablespoons of that lactobacillus to 1 gallon of water. And that's what we sprayed in the greenhouse. That's what he uses for washing. I had somebody tell me that they use it in their pig pens. You know how stinky pigs are? I know, my daughter raises pigs. And they sprayed the pig sties down with lactobacillus, and the day afterwards, you can't smell any pig whatsoever. The bacteria eats the bad bacteria that's making that smell, that odor. Anyway, so it's like a probiotic. It's the same idea of making your kimchi or your sauerkraut, your probiotics that you're making, only this is for your soils and your plants. And it's just to give them more health and vigor and to counteract any of the bad bacteria that's in your soil. So this is what it looks like now. Then to store it, you mix it with molasses, because when we used it, I have to tell you, it was stinky. He was spraying in the greenhouse and I walked in and I went, whoa, what is that smell? And then I realized, because it smelled like stinky milk, I said, oh, that's the lactobacillus. He said, yes. Within 2 hours, you couldn't smell it at all, but it was really potent when he first used it. So now we've mixed it with molasses, and the molasses sweetens the smell, so it doesn't have that sour milk smell. And this will last, the site that I read, he only keeps his about 3 months in the fridge. But the site that I read said that you could keep it up to a year. And so then you'll still take that out, mix it with water, and you can put it in your sprayers, you can put it in your gardens, you can wash your clothes with it, you can get rid of stinky odors with it. So I'm really excited about learning some of this stuff that's been that I've not known about. The other thing that we're going to do on Saturday that I'm really excited about is we're going to take a hike up into a higher elevation. And he says that the other one he wants to teach me is a beneficial indigenous microorganism. It's referred to as a BIM, and you have to go to a higher elevation and you make your culture there. So we are going to take some rice water with us, and we're going to take a jar and we're going to leave it up in the higher elevation just to gather the bacteria that's in the air, the indigenous bacteria, so to speak. And then we'll leave it up there for that 5 to 7 days till we see that it's made a culture, that the water has separated, and then we'll bring it home. We'll probably take a turkey baster up with us and pull out that middle layer so that it doesn't get jiggled and mixed all up again, bringing it back home. And that one you use to spray on your gardens, your exterior gardens, because it's the natural good bacteria that are in our area that will keep our gardens healthy. It's not to be mixed up with mycorrhizomes, which are in the soil, that webbing of that's in the soil. This is just a good bacteria, like a probiotic for the garden. So I encourage you to look at that site. It's really quite interesting, dudegrows.com. But there were several sites that talked about making these cultures, and a lot of the organic gardeners are using them for the health of their gardens and their plants. So that was the main thing I wanted to share with you, because I'm just excited to learn something so different than what I've been exposed to in the past. What do you think, Hig?
That's very interesting. I mean, I think there's a lot of, right now, there's so much new we're learning about microbial communities. And some of this stuff, experimentally, we've known at different levels for a long time, like you say, kimchi and such. Anyway, I think it's an interesting thing to think about. And it's really cool that you're doing those experiments. I put the link to the Dude Grows in the chat, and so if anyone hasn't been looking at that chat, there is people in posting some different comments and stuff in there. So
the other thing that's on that site that he also uses is fermentation of nettle and fermentation of comfrey, which are used back into the garden. They also have in the organic garden nurseries that he's worked in the past, they also make, I can remember what he told me, they make fermentation out of plants that you want to be more resistant to dryness. Like you can make a rutabaga fermentation to spray on your rutabagas to make them less susceptible to drought. And I saw on the internet that there is a 75% chance that this is going to be the warmest summer ever on the earth. And so we are probably going to be in for a very dry summer again. And I was really happy, Cindy, that you covered that topic, and for people to have that heads up of looking at a catchment system of some sort where they could store some water, because we may be looking at a similar scenario of what we had last summer.
Just since you brought that up, I was just going to comment that I think that being even maybe more cautious than usual about having possibility of drought, certainly, and of unusual summer would be good. Some of these forecasts and stuff, the the sudden drop in economic activity we've experienced is pretty unprecedented. So I wouldn't necessarily expect that those forecasts will be as accurate as they usually are. And of course, there's a lot of uncertainty anyway. But there probably will be effects of that. And in particular, I haven't seen a lot of good work done on this yet as far as scientific work. So it's pretty speculative. But by cutting out all of these quite harmful pollution that we usually are putting into the atmosphere, sulfur dioxide and such, that actually can allow the temperatures to increase more. So from a climate change perspective, this is a big complicating factor, and we could have a very hot and possibly dry summer. So I think that, you know, thinking ahead about what we're going to be dealing with, it's always good, and it's maybe extra important now.
So Brett, we're inside of the Climate Action Team Seldovia, you know, group, and last year we pushed out with trees to be planted around the area. Certainly for people who garden, they're going to be doing the different techniques and scientific things that were talked about today. But for like the average or below average naturalist like myself, what's something that we might be able to encourage for the community to consider as we come into this spring and summer? And again, I'm going to circle back to, I'd really like to have Jennifer Gordon talking about the plastics initiative that she started, and how can we do that, something like that for Seldovia, even if it's just educating and challenging people to take on different methods or techniques as to how they go about plastic use. So I kind of answered my question as I said it, but go ahead, Brett.
Well, I maybe I won't try to provide my answer to your question. I've got, you know, things that I'm narrowly focused on in my own little world, and then there are bigger things. I think we need to keep those conversations going.
Well, I just want to say, because it's kind of relevant, you know, around now-ish, is that one of the things we can all do, and I will try to get the link into the chat. I don't know if I can find it on Higgs' computer, but the borough, some of you may be aware that people were trying to get a sustainability commission at the Kenai Peninsula borough level, and that language got added to the comprehensive plan, and now there's people really working to try to get a resolution passed to actually make the commission exist. And so there's an online place where people can go put their individual letters of support, also letters of support from other entities, businesses, governments, councils of different kinds are super useful. So I will try to, everybody can do that from their house in this spring.
Yeah, and we had talked about generating kind of some subgroups or work groups, Brett, where we had people who were looking at big picture things, like Jerry had great thought in regards to wind generation, et cetera, and kind of some mid-level things, and then some smaller, simple initiatives. And I would encourage that we do that so that those folks could work on the side on things to communicate out to the community. It just, if there was a way to get that locked in.
Well, I think maybe just as far as organization for this time we're spending together right now, we should step away from those bigger pictures for questions for a moment that I think are really good to talk about. But I'm curious if there are any questions for Susie about what she was talking about, or about time on the boardwalk. So kind of to keep our topic a little narrower, but we'll have a chance maybe right at the end to kind of broaden out some.
I just wanted to say too that I gave Alicia Chartier a complete list of all the soils and fertilizers and enhancements that I sell with their size and their price. And so that should be on her site. And I also copied it to Time on the Boardwalk's site, my Facebook page. So if you wanted to do a quick look to see what I have, it's all there. Cool. And hopefully there's probably a good 3 weeks before we're going to be planting is my guess, before the soils actually warm up. But I hope to post a complete list of all the vegetables that I've grown and the varieties, so that if there's something you're looking for, you'll know that I have it. And if the band doesn't lift and you just want me to pull plants, then you could just look at the list and say, okay, I want these 2 broccolis and I want this variety that you sell of cauliflower, etc. Because I have multiple varieties of most things.
Susie, I had a question for you. It seems like last year you had some rain barrels that you were selling. And I wondered if you are still carrying anything like that or selling anything like that. Or
Yes.
also if there are kits that you can get to create like those barrels that were at Stan and Rebecca's. In certain situations, it'd be cool if you had one of those up on a stand and then you could install a spigot at the bottom of the barrel. If you carried something like that, or, I mean, I don't even know plumbing wise, maybe it's pretty easy standard type equipment, but to convert just a regular barrel into a rain barrel with a spigot might be another option too.
I think they do that, and I think a lot of people use just a garbage can and use a dip, you know, a bucket or a 2-gallon can to dip into a 55-gallon garbage can. But the rain barrels that I do carry, I think I have 3 of them still in stock, have spigots on them, so they could be put up on to a higher platform and have a gravity feed hooked up to it.
Mm-hmm. It's nice to have that option if you want to water with a hose, rather than like getting the bucket down into the big barrel and dipping out. Like when the water level gets pretty low, it's hard to get access down there to that water that's in the bottom, and then having to lift it all. I mean, it's great workout for your shoulders, but sometimes it's nice to be able to water with a hose instead of trying to regulate the pour off of a big 5-gallon bucket.
Always.
You know what I mean? Yeah. So.
Are there any other questions or comments on the general gardening topic right now?
It's Byron here. So this is a comment for Cindy and Aaron, although this may upset the organophiles. I recall from the borough, the Agriculture Extension Service a few years back, the lady commented that one of the things beets need is this trace mineral boron. And, you know, it'd probably be expensive to test your soil for it, but you can use 20 meal team borax as a source. So you could just try sprinkling some on if you're so inclined, and see if it, you know, impacts your delivery. So there you go.
Have some of that around.
Yeah,
That's,
we were
that's
actually,
cool.
a couple of years ago, we were in some of the areas where they actually mine borax. It's maybe not quite organic, but it's sort of natural.
I had my soil tested last year, and that was one of the things that my soil needed. But I thought at the time, I was told that you could buy 20 meal team borax in all the grocery stores. But I went to 2 grocery stores, and neither one of them had it. Maybe they used to sell it, but this was last summer. I wasn't able to find it in my quick run around Anchorage with my 12 different stops, and I never did come home with 20 meal team borax.
Actually, I was looking for some to use for weed killer and insecticide product, you know, mitigation. But I actually think I found it in Anchorage at a box store, and then in a hardware store. But it's not common in grocery stores anymore. It's not moving off the shelves, so they've taken it out. So
we found it somewhere in Homer, maybe Elmer's, but I'm not sure where.
Yeah. just a thought about early crops and stuff. We have a couple of, I don't know if you can see the length of these. These chives are in a bucket that we just throw under the eaves of the house all winter, ignore it and abuse it. And then in the spring, when it starts getting warm in the greenhouse, we just grab the bucket and bring it inside. As soon as it starts to thaw, it grows chives. So we have this huge, they're like 1.5 feet tall right now and stuff, but it's a nice early source of an onion source that you don't have to work at, and makes it readily available.
If anybody is interested in hearing, Hig had asked about the wild onions. And I've got 3 books here. I have the Flora of Alaska. I have Janice Schofield's Discovering Wild Plants. She's got a picture of wild chives on the cover of that book. And then Patricia Russell's Elutic Plant Lore. And all 3 of these books list wild chive as Allium cenoprasum. I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing that right. And then and that's wild chive. And then wild onion. Janice Schofield and Priscilla Russell don't have a species name on it, but in the Flora of Alaska, they have one listed that's, they say it just only grows in Siberia. So it's a little bit confusing. Maybe it bears a little bit more botanical research, but they also, Janice Schofield mentions that death camas is a easily confused similar plant. So you have to be careful thinking that you have a wild onion and you end up with death camas instead. But anyway, there is a picture in Janice Schofield's book of what she calls wild onion right here. It has a nice bulb on it. So I don't know, that I had not heard of wild onion in Alaska, so I'm pretty fascinated by that. And maybe it grows, it's in higher alpine meadow type places. Is that what I heard you say?
Yes, I've found some in subalpine, kind of like subalpine meadows, but I've found it also at, Seldovia Lake, so it's about 450 feet or something there. And
okay.
But in wet, really wet soils in both places, those are the 2 that are clearest in my head. I've seen it other places too. It may well be the chives. I'm not. I've called them wild onions at some point, but not based on anything in particular. But I should bring back a sample for you.
Yeah, that would be great.
Or Erin, really.
Cool. Yeah, have Erin run up there and grab some.
Robert Creek would be the easier.
Yeah. Are there any last questions or comments on gardening?
Well, one comment about thawing soils early in the season is we save all our coffee grounds, and then we sprinkle them over all of our growing beds, when the sun starts to get strong. And actually, we are thawed down quite a ways, and we can get a full shovel scoop down into the soil right now. But they come out, and as soon as you punch a hole in the snow with the coffee grounds, then the sun gets in there, and the soil starts to heat ahead of time. And when you get like a month or 6 weeks boost on the heat of your soil, you're way ahead when you want to start planting in the spring or in the early summer. So we tried this year comparisons of wood ash to coffee grounds, and we found the coffee grounds are at least twice as fast as the wood ash. And of course they're darker in color, so it makes sense. But just a thought.
We also threw a tarp over part of our garden where we had the rutabagas planted last year, because it still had snow on it and it's a little bit of ice. And within 5 days, our snow was gone, and we were able to dig in that garden, just having the tarp over it. And it was a black tarp. The ground was still frozen under the surface a little bit. We couldn't go down probably as far as you went down, Cheryl, but it was amazing how fast that took care of the soil. So if you're anxious to get into your garden right away and you still have snow on it, you might consider tarping it.
Yeah, Larry actually weeded, deeply weeded the grass out of our raised box. And I don't know, how far did you get down in the soil at least?
On a full spade, shovel deep in even the garden beds that were in the ground, flat with the ground. There's no ice left where I use the coffee grounds.
So it's completely gone with the coffee grounds. And it's been that way for like 2 weeks now. So
when I was putting the coffee grounds on, actually I took pictures of it because it was so striking. It looked like somebody had come through and made snowbanks where the edge of the coffee grounds were. And then there'd be a 2-foot deal of snow
next
where
to
I hadn't put the coffee grounds.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing.
I like that idea. I've used stove ash for that, but I think I can see the coffee grounds working better.
Yeah, it adds a nitrogen source to your garden as well.
All right, so I was thinking that we might well want to talk some more, but I'm thinking I'll stop the recording as soon as people are done talking gardening stuff, just because then it makes it not quite so long if anyone wants to come and watch this who wasn't able to make it today. So is there any last thoughts to close out before I stop the recording?
I have a question or an idea. Since I consider myself a novice gardener, I would not mind having being paired up with a more experienced gardener as like a mentor. I think that might be kind of a neat thing to pair up people that are wanting to begin gardening but are a little nervous of messing up a garden plot on their own and wanting to make it be productive and be successful. And so I really appreciated that Cindy talked about some of the failures that she had in the garden, because I think that not that that's the bad thing, but that's a good thing, that it's going to be some trial and error as we go along. I think that's my biggest fears is about just not being able to produce anything.
Shannon, if I could, oh, sorry, I thought you were
No,
done.
go ahead.
Community gardens are an absolutely fantastic way to have mentors, and you learn so much from other people, even just watching what they do. Kristen, who's Mary Jo talked about her earlier, she started a plot last spring, and I went out there and I was struggling carrying 5-gallon buckets up from the creek to water my garden. And she says, well, why don't we use the wheelbarrow and these kitty litter jugs that have lids on them? And I went, what, why didn't I think of that? And so even the simplest things, it's really a great way to learn and to be out and have some companionship while you're each working in your plot, and then you can share experience of what's going on in your own garden. So it's a great way to do that. It just happens naturally. But stop anytime you see me out there. I always try to not be there on dump day, and then I always end up being there on dump day. And so if you ever see me in the garden, feel free to stop and we'll poke around and look at things together.
Okay, well, I did plant I have some starts that I got some seeds from Susie a while back, and so I've got some cucumbers that are about yay tall right now, and some cabbage sprouts that are in 4 cells at the moment, and I'm running out of room in my bathroom counter, so I got to start figuring out where these things are going. Yeah, so I think I need a little assistance to do them proud, but I appreciate knowing that there's a lot of resources out here. Makes me feel a little less intimidated by it, and certainly I know almost everybody on here except for your parents probably, and so I know I've got a good group of people I can come to for help. So thank you guys. I learned a lot today. I really did.
Yes, so I was also going to say that my woofer is also looking for side work, and he's a really good worker, and he would be willing to dig a garden or some of that really hard grunt work that you may feel you're not capable of doing, he would be very willing to come and give you a bid on that.
I think one of my questions that I probably have, and not to get too personal about my own situation, but I do have room for a garden on my property. I just am not sure where the best location is for it, based on like where the house is, where the sun is. We've got a lot of trees around there, so there's a lot of shade. So just trying to figure out where the best place is that it will be positioned on my property, and then trying to figure out what I want to do and how to protect it through the winter. So that's kind of some of the stuff that I'm trying to figure out. So maybe even just walking around with people that could give me some thoughts and ideas would be helpful.
Mm-hmm.
Tanya, could you tell us as far as kelp gathering? I know Cindy was showing that those photos of Allison being so kind to let her have everything in her car. But don't you normally, are you gathering in May when the ribbon kelp and everything is pretty prolific? Or is that more of the fall? Sorry.
No, I think the best time to gather is coming up in May. I know I was out on the last low tide, not this week, but last week, and at 4 different locations, and stuff is just starting to take off as far as having enough growth to make it worthwhile, because you only want to collect 1 to 10% of wherever you're collecting, so you want to be able to spread your collecting around a lot. So it's coming up though. I mean, May, June is the best time.
We gather a lot that's already dead off the beach, and
Mm-hmm.
that, the fall storms seem like a pretty good time, and that's hopefully real. I don't know. Would you
There's
agree?
dead stuff on the beach now, but just not in a convenient.
Yes, there is.
Yeah, no, the wind we had a little while ago pulled a lot out. But I mean, would you agree, Tanya, that it's pretty low impact to pull it off the beach like that?
No, that's a great idea. And if you get it right after a good windstorm, it's still just as fresh as if you collected it yourself, especially if you're after bull kelp.
There's a lot of dried kelp that's been pretty beat up from the last big tides and storms, and it's high on the beach from the high tide bringing it in. So it's been out there for a long time now and had a little bit of washing from the rain. So if you're collecting kelp for the garden to work in with your soils, that's a really good place to take it from the high beach where it's sat out for a long time. It's been kind of washed by the rain, so some of that salt's been washed out of it. And it's right now, the kelp that I saw was in small pieces. You didn't have to chop it a lot because it was really beat up and in small chunks, easy to add to the garden.
This is Byron. If I may just add an aside on kelp, and I've used it a lot, even using a tractor from inside the beach, is it tends to have gravel. I mean, it's amazing how big it can get as fellow travelers. I've just raked it onto a board and then hauled it with forks up to the property. So I've ended up, frankly, screening it. In other words, I use it's like 1/4-inch hardware cloth with a built frame, and it's very labor intensive, but you end up with something like, peat or any kind of screened soil, because otherwise I was just putting so much gravel into the garden when I just dumped the kelp in en masse. Thanks. Over.
My only suggestion would be for everybody that's starting the season out is to do a pH testing on your soil to see where you are. You want to probably 7 is neutral, and potatoes like it like 5.2 to 6. So one area of your garden should be more basic and one more acidic, so that you can accommodate the needs of the plants. But any land that's around here is pretty much very acidic, so adding lime to it this time of year is really a good idea, and in the fall. So,
hey, Brett, I've got to jump off to get onto the governor's press conference, but just if you don't mind, once it's all done, I know you recorded it. Are we going to put this on a YouTube channel?
Yeah,
So Sorry?
Yeah, I think I'll put it on YouTube. I think that'd be the simplest, and then
That'd be great. And then that's something we could, post that link to the Chatterbox later would be excellent. And I did notice that somebody who was trying to find the link at the last minute missed out on joining us. And so I think it's okay now. We could probably put the links out publicly for future gatherings.
Okay.
I'm going to sign off.
See you later, Laurel.
Okay, thanks.
Well, I think what with Shannon's question or her comment there, I think that this is something that we should all just recognize as really valuable, that we can all share our knowledge, keep having these conversations. There really is a tremendous amount that you can grow here. And I'm no pro. What I'm trying to learn about right now is some about container gardening, because we have so much trouble with horsetails out here. And so I was going to try some experiments with that, and was talking to Neil Wagner in Homer, and that's another huge source of information. Not Neil only, but Neil and many people in Homer with tremendous amount of experience growing in our climate and such. So I think it's really great it's a great service to keep sharing what and helping improve our food security, reduce our impact. This is good stuff.
And I just want to say too that for the last 10 years, Time on the Boardwalk has sponsored a garden walk. We usually do it the week after Homer's garden tour. And it's just a really good time for knowledge sharing. So we walk around to the gardens and we talk about, oh, wow, how did you get this vegetable so big? Or what are you using in your soil? And so I encourage all of you to consider allowing us to put you on our tour this year. Sometimes I have a hard time finding gardeners that want to open up their garden because they're concerned that they have too much chickweed, or they haven't been tending it properly, or they had a bad crop of this that's sitting there making their garden ugly, so they don't want people seeing it. But is a really great way to share knowledge when we can all walk around in the group and talk about what we're looking at.
Yeah, and it is good to see things that aren't working too. We learn from those things, definitely. So yeah. No, that's great. I have not participated in that before, but I don't know what our situation is.
Well, Aaron has.
But yeah. Well, I think because we've been at this for a couple hours, I don't necessarily think we have a lot of time to go off in other directions. If no one objects, I'm going to stop the recording now. Is that all right?